Okay, so we are using these documents, which we have already gone over, and our evidence outline here, which again, we are using this pre-filled version here, and we are going to build our essay. Now, again, we did not put an introduction in here, although realistically we would. So if I were doing this as a full essay, I would start with an introduction, which would just give me a brief introduction of what the New Deal is. So during the 1930s, the government had put many new policies into place to help Americans get out of and recover from the depression that was, we'll change that actually, from the worldwide economic depression of the time. Many of these government programs focused on recovery and relief for the general public. One big push during the New Deal was to create programs that regulated bank activities, made it easier for people to buy homes, and set rules on loans and mortgages. Through the New Deal, agencies like the Fair Housing Administration, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and the settlement group worked to fix unfair housing and lending practices that had helped contribute to the Depression. Then, okay, that's just a very brief background. And it's honestly, I don't love it, but that's what it was. And then we would go into our topic sentence, which you've already gotten. Although New Deal policies were designed to help Americans recover from the Great Depression, some policies made it extremely difficult to, so actually that should not say to, for non-white Americans to buy homes and build personal wealth. Again, we're not focusing on a lot of this. We are focusing on this thesis right here and the evidence we are going to use to prove it. So if you look at our document here of supporting evidence, right? The first part is the New Deal protected economic rights and tried to expand economic opportunities. New Deal programs backed home loans and tried to make it easier for people to access mortgages. I personally would use document 1 and document 3 to prove that. And really, you can pick which one. I think I would pick document 1 just because document 3 is also going to address redlining. So how do we know that the New Deal programs backed home loans? If you look at the explanation in document 1, they are housing experts working to provide a report that is going to have a bearing on the future housing policy. So what I'm going to do now to connect this, right? In 1935, a committee of wealthy white men worked on a report that would be presented to President Roosevelt. This report was meant to address the issue of housing in the area east of the Mississippi and the possible solutions that the government could come up with to ease this anticipated problem. Okay, we're using our evidence here to support this concept that they are going to come up with this program. So the committee was made up of members of the different New Deal programs that had recently been formed to solve the economic troubles of the Great Depression, such as the Federal Housing Administration, FHA. You want to always, if you're going to abbreviate, you always want to put in your full sentence there first what the abbreviation stands for before you abbreviate it, and then you can switch to your abbreviation for the rest of it. The Rural Electrification Company Administration, REA, and a housing expert within the Treasury Department. Through this photograph, we can see that the government is taking the problems of the Depression seriously and is working to come up with a solution that will provide economic relief. And again, we want to address that second part there and expand economic opportunities by making it easier. Economic opportunities. They are doing this by looking at ways to make it more affordable to buy a home and get a mortgage. Unfortunately, because this governing body lacks diversity, the reports and the solutions that the committee will come up with are going to be far more beneficial to people of their own status rather than equal to all members of the country. You'll notice that I'm not specifically talking about, what this source is or this source shows or anything like that. I'm simply explaining the source and then using the point of view here to analyze the source and how it's going to make it difficult for non-white Americans to build personal wealth. I typically don't cite things like your DBQ project has done because that's not how you would cite things in an academic writing. Realistically, if you were going to cite this, at the end you would say source 1. You would also use the title of the source, Big Talk on Little Houses. And then if there was a page number, but there is no page number there and that's fine. Then we are going to carry on to our next concept here. They make it easier for people to access mortgages, but redlining and policies make it really impossible. So we're going to use document 2 and document 3 to prove that. So once the committee has given its report to the government, other New Deal programs and groups that were formed under this policy are given the tools to work on selling houses and given loans. The Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Federal Housing Administration are going to work together to determine how to get more people into buying homes. However, never mind, I don't like that sentence. One of the ways that these companies are going to do this is to visit neighborhoods across the country and map out the areas of the United States that are most likely to be popular with home buyers. But the Homeowners Loan Corporation, sorry, let's add that in there. Homeowners Loan Corporation is a government-backed bank agency. Don't mind the drilling, they're working on something over there. This agency is going to use these maps as tools to deny people loans to buy houses in certain areas. When the maps are made in the 1930s, the map makers, or cartographers if you want to be fancy, use many different factors to build their maps. Unfortunately, one of the factors that they take into account when determining the safety and desirability of a neighborhood is who currently lives in that area. Sorry, that's spelled wrong. If the area of the city is populated with more immigrants, people of color, or lower class working families, that area of the city is deemed unhazardous and undesirable to live in. Therefore, if you were to go to the bank and ask for a home loan, when the loan is pushed through, the loan company will look at the map, determine if you are trying to buy in a red-lined area, and make their loan decision from there. If you are white, you will not be given a loan for those areas. You will be guided to the best and highly desirable areas of the neighborhood and told to buy a house there. If you are not white, you will be guided to the hazardous areas of the neighborhood and told you can only buy a house there. If you are not white and attempt to buy a house in a highly desirable area, the bank will put an outrageously high interest rate on your loan, which will make the loan officer deny the loan, therefore making it impossible to get a house or a mortgage in any area that is populated by white people. So as you see, we're just using this evidence to prove our point. We are talking about redlining. They didn't have access to loans. They had to buy rent in less desirable areas. You can also use document 3 for this. I would cite this from document 3, San Francisco Residential Security Map. Source 3. Again, we're focusing on how to use the evidence here. We are doing things like this. You really have to pull in the New Deal programs, right? These homeowners loan corporation, map makers used the factors. The homeowners loan corporation, it's a New Deal program. That's how it's making it impossible for the New Deal. We have to tie in that New Deal part. Otherwise, it's just talking about how hard it is to buy a home. And yes, we know it's hard to buy a home, but we have to make sure that we are addressing how the New Deal policies made it difficult. Additionally, if you, for some reason, did not need to get a loan to buy a house, but had the full cash value, you could still be denied the right to live in a certain area based on your race. Many new suburbs had started to be built during the New Deal, with many new rules and laws being put into place. As people started to make more money through the New Deal back to work programs, they started looking to build neighborhoods that were convenient and nice to live in. For white people, this meant they would buy a section of land and build a new house on the land. For non-white people, they were excluded from the neighborhood based on their race. This legal exclusion came in the form of what became known as racial restrictions during the New Deal era. A racial restriction or covenant is a written document as part of a neighborhood or deed agreement that states that only white people can buy, sell, live in, or rent the house in question. Therefore, if you had the money and you were not white, you were still not allowed to live in the highly desirable neighborhood. The laws would not allow you to occupy this space. Due to these legal restrictions that came from these New Deal practices, non-white people were forced to buy homes or build homes in areas that were usually disregarded and not taken care of. They were not often allowed the chance to actually buy a home, but were usually forced to rent because there were no homes to buy. If you cannot buy a home, you cannot build wealth. If you cannot build wealth, you cannot have access to all that wealth grants you. For people who have generational wealth, they have access to typically better neighborhood resources, schools that get more funding, and they have something to pass on to the next generation that is worth money. Non-white Americans did not get this opportunity because the policies of the New Deal that were made to promote economic relief were not offered to them. In fact, they were specifically restricted from these opportunities due to the same government that was creating the New Deal programs. For many years after the New Deal, these programs left legacies that made it still nearly impossible for people of color to build wealth. It was not until 1968, with the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, that makes it illegal for racial covenants to even exist, that people started seeing some minor changes. Almost 3 decades after the New Deal was supposed to save America from the Depression, most non-white Americans were still suffering from the hardships that they had been facing in the 1930s. Again, that's like it's not the best piece of evidence, but it's still a good piece of evidence. It comes from the video, so if you're going to cite that, it also comes from the other source, and I do realize I forgot to cite this source up here. You probably would want to cite this as source 2, Blue Ridge neighborhood. There are a lot of different ways you could use that source too. You could be more specific about it. You don't have to be. This is just one way to use it, so keep that in mind. You could use this any way you want. It does not have to be this. A lot of you have really focused on the part that they can't live there unless they were servants. And that is also something that you would want to put in there, but this is getting long. And I realize that for a lot of you, this is already seeming way too long. So I do want to wrap this up because our goal here is just to focus on how to use the evidence, not necessarily more than that. And so the whole point of this is just so you can see how do you use the evidence to support your thesis. And the whole point of this really is for you to see that when you're using the evidence, you're not quoting from it. That is super important. There's no quotes in here. You are explaining it and you are analyzing it in connection with whatever you're talking about up here. And what we're talking about are New Deal policies that make it difficult to buy homes and build personal wealth. So most of your answer should be about New Deal policies making it difficult, not about what the source is. It is about how the source connects to that. Yes, we're talking about what the source is, but if you look at this paragraph specifically, right, we're not talking about what the map itself is or what it specifically shows. It's how this map is being used to prevent people from buying houses in certain areas. So we will keep working on this. Use this as much as you want or as little as you want, but it is here if you need it.